Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is Tuesday and a day for some writing jargon. Today we are going to discuss some fun tools, flashback and foreshadow. Excuse me. Let's start with a flashback. A flashback is a scene in a movie, novel, story, etc. that is set in a time frame or time period earlier than the main part of the story, or earlier than where you currently are in the story. This is a great tool. You can start your story closer to your plot line, but then visit this vital history later instead of starting at that scene and trying to drag your story through all the stuff that didn't matter in between. I could have used a flashback in City of the Ancients because you didn't need to see Kirsha when she was, 3 or 5 or whatever. But I could have used a flashback so that the reader saw the scenes where Dante beat Kirsha and Belboobsy or Majority tried to enter her mind. But instead, Kirsha told of those things. And I glazed over those details. If I used a flashback, the reader would definitely know why Kirsha is so scared. In Tristan, another one of my stories, the reader meets the main character, Tristan. And that character doesn't know how she got where she is. So she thinks back to the last things she remembers. In that story, the readers get to see those memories as if they are a scene. But it is clear that it is a memory to help Tristan understand her present time and her present situation. Another way to use it is to kind of pass over the scene in your story and then flashback and revisit it, or show the scene from a different perspective. You can pass by it and then show it, or you can kind of show it and then look at it from a different perspective, from a different character to view the scene. Now, I have never written a mystery before, but I think this would be a vital tool to solving, because as you go through, you look at the scene from one character and you go back and you look at the scene from a different character. A different character would be picking up different details of the crime or the murder scene or what have you. If you write mystery novels, then leave a comment below on if you use this tool a lot. Also, you could use a flashback so that you avoid spoilers. Your readers don't need to know everything right away. So when the information becomes pertinent, then use the flashback and drop in that scene or drop into that scene. Sometimes a reader won't understand things, and you have to piece your story together and bring your reader to a certain level of understanding about the world you create. So a flashback saves the reader from having to flip back and forth several pages or chapters and going, "Oh, I understand now." So if there's a place in the story where you feel like your reader would be like, "Why are you telling me this? How is this relevant?" etc., then this is a perfect scene to save for flashback. Even in our own lives, things happen and we don't understand them. But later, we say hindsight is 20/20 because suddenly things make sense. Oh, I know why she did that. So you understand things as time goes on or as more events occur. So sometimes it's better to save that so that it's right there where the reader needs it. So I will bring up one more use. Flashback is very useful when you have multiple books in a story and you flash back to a scene in an earlier book. You do this for at least 2 reasons. One is to help the reader remember what happened in the earlier book. You may have had so much happen so far and they don't remember that part. And 2 is to highlight that scene if it is central to your story or your reader's understanding. At this point, the reader may not realize how vital the scene is. He or she may be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." or that was funny, or that was scary, or whatever they say. Later, the reader will realize why you highlighted it and see it as an interconnected event that moves your plot forward. Now, foreshadowing can be a warning or indication or suggestion of a future thing or event. Often, it isn't a scene. It's just a sentence or statement from a character, or a character may see something, and later you understand why. It can be a full-out scene, but generally it's not. In The King's Daughter, another one of my stories, the companions are meeting at the inn in Smelder, and one of the companions is asking one of their mages about the ability of Sorks to produce multiple images. Still, at this point in the story, the companion doesn't even comprehend what he is asking. But a mage among his group confirms that for him that Sorks can produce multiple images. And shortly after the conversation, the companions have to escape from the soldiers, and they do so by riding on an image of a horse. That is just an example of foreshadowing. Another example would be if you have prophecy or visions in your story. A writer can usually write prophecy or visions in such a way that it's not straightforward. I say visions, maybe you say dreams. Characters have to interpret dreams. There's usually a hidden meaning. I play with this a lot in The King's Daughter because the long dead kings wrote down visions and dreams. And in the story, I make a distinction between the two because my characters say a vision will come to pass as seen. But a character can alter a dream. That's just how I defined it in that story. And then in that story, sometimes I allow the readers to read a vision beforehand. But sometimes a reader reads the visions of a long dead king long after it happens in the story. So I use the vision as a modified flashback. You just have fun with this stuff. That's why writing is so much fun. We have so many tools at our fingertips. Think of the movie Total Recall. In that movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger goes to get a fantasy vacation ship placed in his mind, right? And they ask him to describe the female he wants to take the vacation with. And the viewers see the woman. The woman actually appears later in the movie. And she is pertinent to the story. So that was a foreshadow. Leave a comment below on if you realize when a show or book used foreshadow or flashback. Sometimes, some movies I watch twice. And I see the foreshadowing the second time through. It's like, oh, yeah, I know why they're showing me that now. The second time that I'm watching it. And sometimes we as writers know what is going to happen in a future scene. And you will drop in the foreshadowing without even thinking about it. It just happens. And then you go back and you read it and you're like, oh yeah, that predicts this other thing. In the scene above where I talked about the multiple image, I prepared my readers for something the companions can't comprehend for a while yet. To the companions, the horses seemed real. They seemed so real that they don't think it's just a magical image. But the reader knows something is up. And they are prepared for when the images disappear and the companions lose the horses. Foreshadowing helps to interrelate the actions or thoughts in a story. Play around with these two literary tools. It can be a lot of fun. For a flashback, though, make sure your reader is aware of going back in time. Because you don't want your reader lost or confused. In Tristan, the chapter title is a clear indication that I've gone back in time. And when you watch movies or TV shows, sometimes I flash the words up on the screen to indicate, 40 days ago or whatever. They indicate the amount of time that they've gone back. Sometimes it's years in the movies. You see, 10 years ago, whatever. If I used a flashback in City of the Ancients, I could say something like, Kirsha shuddered as she remembered the events. Then she closed her eyes as she recalled the events to Kirian and Kilty, starting from her earliest memory. I would probably do that scene in first person, so the reader would know I was using Kirsha's perspective or memory. I could also use a visual cue, like using italics for the scene. Change my script to italics. Of course, legibility is important, so you could indent the text instead, and then end the scene by saying, Kirian reflected on all that Kirsha said and shared, and he now better understood things. Kilty felt very scared because Kirsha's description was so vivid. It was easy for Kilty to picture things, and she knew she never wanted to meet a dissenter. I don't know that I will put in a flashback for this, because those details that would actually be contained in that might be too graphic. At this point, I feel that Kirsha is just putting things together herself, and the reader sees the deaths in the village and only the mark in the back of the head. So I feel the reader has enough details without using this tool. But I told you about it since you were on this journey with me and you know more about that story. So I hope this would help you understand how to use a flashback in this situation. And of course, you realize that writers have many, many choices. Now, a couple of Tuesdays ago, I read about a cave. I read about 2 caves. And the second one, I just dropped the reader into the chase. Now, if I decided to pick up that scene and create a story, okay, and start right there where I started, I could certainly flash back to before the character was running from the enemy and hoping the enemy didn't see her. I could flash back to the planning of going to the enemy and even giving contingency plans. The bones in the floor of the cave could be a foreshadow. The eerie red light could be a foreshadow, or even the sound of the closing of that gate. All of those things could give a hint to the reader of what will happen next. Of course, you don't have to use foreshadowing to hint at a bad thing happening. It could be for something good as well. The same with a flashback. You could flash back to a good time to help your character relax or remind them why they're on their journey. Your character could be posting watch and bored out of their mind, and you don't want your readers bored. But the flashback would fill in the time while they're there waiting, and it would also give time for your reader without just sitting there posting watch. But the flashback fills in the time, and then of course it would be interrelated. Remember, interrelated events. So we want the plot to move forward to an increasing intensity to reach our climax. So a flashback could also be how things happened last time. So your character wants to avoid the mistakes he or she made last time. When posting watch, thinking about what they did, that didn't go so well, maybe I should do it this way, So it could be like a flashback and a foreshadowing, all in that one thing that the soldier is thinking about while they're on watch. I'll give you another example of a flashback in my books. In my Mykela series, I start the story when Mykela is 10 or almost 10. Then in book 3, I flashback to when she was 2 and magically built her citadel. In book 1, the reader doesn't need that information, and it doesn't move the story along at that point. But in book 3, this information helps other characters and the reader to know the amount of magical power Mykela had very early on. And this knowledge gives hope, that Mykela is strong enough already for the final battle that will take place in Book 5. Another flashback in this series is when King Cursed reads a couple of journal entries from his grandfather or great-grandfather. The journal entry reads like a scene. And I do think I have that one in italics and indented. In this flashback, the reader learns why Mykela, a little kitten, is so important. Before this, the characters and readers just see the kitten often and throughout the story. But the importance isn't known. I was reading this to my youngest daughter. My youngest daughter kept asking me over and over about Mykela. What's Mykela for? What's Mykela's purpose? She wanted me to spoil things. But I held the information until the readers and the characters in the story needed it. And until then, characters just wondered about the kitten. In this case, I didn't want the readers or characters to have the information too soon. The journal entry was a perfect way to learn about Mykela's importance. So as writers, you will have to decide when you want your readers to have information. Do you want to give them a heads up? Do they need a hint beforehand? Then use foreshadowing. Is the information secret, protected, or hard to understand? Then use flashback. Sometimes too much information in the beginning is too much. But by a certain point in the story, your reader will want to know. And by a certain point in the story, they will need to know. This is a balance that you will have to strike when they want it and when they need it. So you'll have to, dip out little tidbits of information for them. Now, in the above story, when I use Mykela for her purpose, which is shortly after the journal entry, I use her for her purpose. The reader understands what is happening. But without the journal entry, the reader would probably be confused. They didn't need that information too far in advance. They needed it right before it happened so they could understand and appreciate the scene when Mykela served her purpose. This is a balance. Okay, writers, there is no writing assignment today, but I've given you a lot to think about. Have fun with it. Leave a comment on which one you have used, flashback, foreshadowing, or both. Join me Friday for story time. I will read City of the Ancients, Chapter 20, City of the Ancients. And yes, the last chapter is the same title as the book. This is the last chapter of the story. So the following week, we'll start a new season. So starting next Tuesday will be a new season, Season 2. We will get a new plot and a new story. So you'll join me on Tuesday for some more jargon or writing prompt. I think on Tuesday I've decided to go ahead and do allegory and archetype. We talked about that a few Tuesdays ago. So that's going to be this coming Tuesday. But if you have suggestions on what I should do, then leave that in the comments, because I'm always looking for new ideas. Some of you have kids, your kids are in school, you know what they're learning, what they're not. So if you want me to hit something that you think would be good for them to get, then leave that in the comments. Writers may send their chapters for the chapter exchange to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. In between days, you can visit my website at www.bymykela.com, where you will find fictional character biographies. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.